Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So today I'm going to walk around the back and the front of the garden just to show you what's beautiful at the end of July. So from this angle, you can see the limelight, that is the one that is on the east side. It's fully bloomed. The blooms are now white with the hint of green on the tip, which I think is most beautiful. And on this side, which is the west side, you can kind of see that this limelight, it's also in full bloom, but you can kind of see that the blooms and the panicles of the limelights are a bit more green and not as white as the one that you saw earlier on the east side. And this view here, you can see all of my tree lilies. They're actually in full bloom. And because of all the rain that we've been having for the last few weeks, they have actually started to fade, I think, a little bit earlier than usual. And from this angle, you can actually see them more close up, and the colors are actually that buttery yellow, which I think is really, really lovely. And with the contrast between the firelight panicles that are starting to pink up, I think that looks really pretty. And if I can find a video of the lilies that I took last week, I think they were actually better looking last week than they are today, because you can kind of see many of the blooms have already faded. And with all the rain that we've been having for the last couple of weeks, in a way, it actually made gardening a lot easier because I didn't have to water as much as I normally would have to do. And I do all the watering by hand. And here's another beautiful view of the limelight on the west side of the garden. I think that's really pretty in combination with the bobo tree, the bobo bush that I have in container, as well as that jantar cedar. And you can kind of see that I underplanted with many of the mini snapdragons that I planted from seed. It's quite beautiful. And here's a closer look of that mini snapdragon. I actually don't know how many I planted, but I did not expect them to be so full. And I also did not expect them to be all yellow, which I think is a lovely combination with the chartreuse green of the jantar cedar. The mini snapdragons, they're actually planted from seed that I collected last year. And so the color is actually quite a surprise, but I think it's really lovely. It's got that sort of like a fluorescent yellowish, sort of with a hint of green, which I think is really, really pretty. I'm actually also loving this view as well, with the fullness of the calabraco basket and the lilies with the limelight blooms in the background like that. I think that's really, really stunning. And on a side note, I don't know if you noticed, but the bobo blooms in this container, it's actually had started to turn a little bit of a pink here. So you see that? Isn't that pretty? I think that's really pretty. And you can also see that there are many stems here that have panicles that are just sort of starting to form. And that's because this part here gets more sun, and this side of the basket actually gets very little sun. So that explains why it's blooming a little bit later than the other half of the container. And the same reason can also be used to explain why the bulbos that I have here in this part of the garden, it's ahead of the bulbos that I have that lined up this part here of the garden. And here from this view, you can clearly see that the bulbos on this side are about a week or more ahead of the ones on this side. The blooms are all white, and the ones that are on the bulbos here are still in that sort of chartreuse green state. And this limelight, which is on the west side, it still has that chartreuse, and you can see that better here from this angle. And right here, you can kind of see that my bloomstruck are actually starting to bloom. So I did not get any on old wood, so though these ones here that I have are actually blooms on new wood. And so I think I have a few of them that are about to bloom. So can't wait to see that sort of blush pink color on them very soon. And I really love it because it's got that sort of pink contrast with the background of the incredible blooms. I think that looks really pretty. And with all the rain that we've been getting, you can kind of see that the blooms on these Calabracaras are starting to sort of fade, and they haven't been able to form fully because these actually do best when their soil is able to dry out completely in between. And this also reminds me that I need to cut these back soon, because behind all the blooms that you see, there's just tons of dead growth. So that has to be done very soon. And the same thing goes for the baskets that are on this side as well. Now you can kind of see that I bought all of the baskets at the same time, but the shapes of the blooms on this one is a little bit different than the one that you saw earlier, right? This one has got more of that sort of fuchsia, almost reddish pink color on them. And the purple is actually more sort of deeper than the one that you saw earlier in the other basket. So here's my Pilu clematis. Now this year I've decided not to cut the vines back. I'm going to keep all of them so that the blooms can form for me next spring. And the blooms that are on old wood are actually a double bloom, and I have not been fortunate to see them since I've been here, because every single year I always get so much dieback that I end up cutting everything back to the ground. So I always get lots of new growth, and the blooms on new wood are always single blooms. So fingers crossed that I can see that next spring. And right in front of the Pilu clematis, or actually, sorry, the roses, the Lightshore Angel roses, I have two bulbul plants, and I think this location is the most sort of suitable location for them. And whatever it is that's here, I think the bulbos are really loving it, because they are always, blooming ahead, and the blooms are always full and compact. And I think they're most beautiful in this spot here compared to all the other bulbos that I have around the garden. And I don't know if you noticed, but I do have some of the stems on these bulbos that are about 3 or just slightly over 3 feet or so. So in terms of age, I think these bulbos are about 6 years old now. And so usually they grow for me to about 2 to 3 feet. But I think now that they are a little bit more mature, you can kind of see that some of the stems on all of the bushes actually are actually starting to creep up to about 3.5 feet or so. And just in case you're wondering, when I prune these, I actually only prune away all of the old blooms and any of the, broken stems or, dead stems, and that's it. I don't prune these back very much. So this is what they look like after 6 years of very little pruning, other than what I just told you. And here in this little container, I've got 3 plants, or maybe 4, of the Calabracaras that I sold from seed. And I love that color combination that they have. There's a little bit of a pink, a deeper sort of a fuchsia pink. There's a hot pink, and also a really deep color purple. I think that combination is just so pretty. And here we're actually coming around to this firelight. Now this one is, I think, around 4 feet tall and about 3 feet wide or so. This one, I think it's only in its 4th year, if I remember correctly. And it was a rooted cutting that I got from the other plant that I'm going to show you later on. And you can also see that the panicles on the firelight are actually starting to turn that sort of blush pink. It's really pretty right now. And from this angle, you can see that the sunlight has that glowing effect on these panicles, which makes them really pretty. And I'm also loving the contrast between the pensament, the burgundy color of the pensament seed head, and the panicles of the firelight. I think that's really pretty. And here from this angle, you can see all the beautiful blooms on old wood on the 2 blue jangles that I have right here underneath this bulbul tree. Now, I was thinking that I might not get any blooms on old wood because of the severe ice storm that we've had during our past winter, but I think we're just so lucky to be seeing so many blooms in old wood, which I really love. And for those of you that are curious, our native soil is actually alkaline, which gives the blooms on the jangles a sort of a pinkish color. But the blooms that you see here have a little hint of blue and lavender color to it. And that's because I've actually watered it with a little bit of diluted coffee every now and then, just to kind of help to acidify the soil a little bit and giving it that sort of bluish lavender hint of color, which I really, really love. And here in this container I have here is the quick fire fab, and I don't know if you notice how big it is, but it has grown so much. Back in spring when I transplanted one stem, and since then it has grown into a bush that is almost, I would say, 1.5 feet wide and almost 2 feet tall. And you can kind of see that the stems are strong and sturdy, and the blooms are a little bit behind. I did get one panicle that bloomed back in early July, but the rest you can kind of see are still forming, and they have not fully opened yet. And from this angle you can see the contrast between this firelight, which is a piece of this mother firelight plant here. This one I think is 5 years old. This one is in its 4th year, and right in between here you see is the lava lamp flare. And I keep on saying this, but I did not mean to plant such a big plant right in front of the board like that. I initially thought that it was going to be about 2 to 3 feet tall, like the bobo that I have here, so that's why I put it at the front. But now that it's grown so big, and I don't know if you can see, but it's almost reaching the height of the fence. And for those of you that know, that our fence is about 6 feet tall, so the lava lamp, I think it's almost about 5 feet, so it's huge, even taller than the firelight as well. So I'm not sure what's going on, but it must be loving that spot. And here, this limelight, you can kind of see that it's about 4 feet tall and almost 4 feet wide. And you can also see the beautiful pink that's starting to form on those panicles as well. And here on the lava lamp, you can kind of see that I have panicles here that have been out for a while now, and there are actually some that have started to color up as well. But I do have many panicles on the taller part of the plant that haven't opened up fully yet. So I think once they open up, the blooms and the plant will probably going to be about 6 feet tall. And here's that limelight that I trained 3 years ago. Look how big it has gotten. The canopy, I purposely made it really small just so that the plant can be kept in container. But if I were to plant this in the ground, I think it would be so much bigger than what it is right now. And you can kind of see that the panicles on this limelight are a little bit behind the ones that I have planted in the ground. And I'm actually loving this container of Incrediballs here. I've actually, have really, really good luck with these this year. I think they're blooming beautifully. The blooms, because I didn't prune the stems, the plant back very much, so the blooms are a little bit on the smaller side, but I'm actually loving it more so because with all the rain and thunderstorm that we've had in the past couple weeks, these blooms have really held up, and you can kind of see I have no stakes and nothing holding them up, but they've been holding themselves up really nicely in this storm. So I'm really thrilled and happy about how strong these stems are. And with the contrast between the Incrediballs and my Jantor cedar, as well as my limelight prime there, I don't know if you can see that, and all of the other plants that I have in this part of the garden, I think this view is just really stunning. And of course, the limelight prime panicles are starting to come into bloom. I don't know if you can see, but some of the panicles have a hint of a sort of a yellowish green color to them, which I think that's really pretty. And here's a beautiful view of my firelight tidbit. You can kind of see that it's a little bit shorter than the bulbos that are next to it. And it's got that sort of hint of lime color, almost like greenish glowing effect with the sun shining on it. I think that's just so pretty. For those of you that are curious, the Firelight Tidbit is in its second year in the garden, and last year was its first year in this spot, and it was not loving it because it bloomed for me, I think in, oh goodness, mid or late August. So by the time it started blooming, the cool weather kicked in and it never got a chance to really color up for me. So it was not very, I was not very happy with them last year, but I think this year, if they keep on performing the way they do, I'm really gonna enjoy them and love them so much, because you can kind of see, look at the beautiful compact of the blooms. I think they are just really, really beautiful, and it's hard to see them right now, but you can kind of see how compact they look, right? I think that looks really pretty. With the shape and the color of the blooms at this state, I think they remind me a little bit of the little lime, right? I don't know if you noticed, but this is what they remind me of. But I think they might be even better because they're compact, or at least they're supposed to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. So I'm hoping that they stay that tall, because really I don't have much garden space left if they grow any taller than 2 to 3 feet. But I'm really loving them this year, and like I said, fingers crossed that I will be able to see the color transition that they go through until fall. And I'm actually also loving the contrast between the blooms of the Firelight Tidbit and the Endless Summer original in the back there. I think that looks really pretty. And from this angle, you can see the contrast between the blooms of the Firelight Tidbit and the Bobo. They both have that chartreuse green, but you can kind of see that the panicles on the Bobo at this stage is a bit more airy looking, and they look like little crystals, right? So it's very different between these two. And here's a beautiful view of the front garden. This year, I think the island has come along so beautifully. I love the Bobo, and I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago I planted the third Bobo there, and I think with the addition of the third Bobo, this whole part of the garden is just so much fuller, and I think that makes it look so much more pretty. And this year, I'm also loving the placement of the Firelight in container there in the back behind the vanilla strawberry tree. I think that looks really pretty. And you can kind of see that the panicles of the Firelight in this container is way ahead of the blooms in the back because of the color, the intense pink that you see on there. The panicles in the back are just starting to blush up, whereas the panicles here are much of a deeper pink compared to the ones in the back. And the Firelight here was also blooming earlier this year as well. And I think it must have started blooming just around the time the Bobos were blooming. So I think having it in container and having it in a place where it is exposed to more sun, like we are here at the front garden, I think that makes the Firelight bloom so much earlier than in a location that gets less sun. And here from this view, you can see the contrast between the color of the Quickfire fab in container and those of the Firelight. And you can see the Firelight has colored up much more intense and more beautiful compared to the Quickfire fab. And from this view, you can see that the panicles on the vanilla strawberry are just starting to turn white, which indicates that it is somewhat behind the blooms of the Firelight. And here is the Quickfire fab that I have planted in ground. Now this one is in its second full year in this space, and you can kind of see that with all the rain that we've had lately, some of the panicles are a little bit floppy at this time, but I have many panicles that are still upright. And just in case you're wondering why, it's only because the plant is still quite young and there are many stems here that are actually brand new. For those of you that watched the video in spring, you'll notice that I had to cut this plant back almost completely to the ground because this is where we actually pile up our snow pile in the winter, and so I had so much damage that I had to cut the plant all the way back, and that's why these stems are floppy right now, because they're actually fresh new stems that came up from the ground this year. So if you're fortunate to be planting it in a much better spot that do not get as much winter damage as I do, you're going to find that the stems are going to hold up and they're going to be much more stronger than the ones that I have here. So I'm going to pop up a few images of the quickfire fab that I filmed a few days ago, just before the rain that we've had recently. So my hope for the quickfire fab is that once it gets established, it will be able to withstand the, snow and severe winter that we have here in our part of the country. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that it will be beautiful and it will be able to hold up and stay strong, so that it won't be as floppy as what I'm experiencing this year. And I don't know if you noticed, but the Serrano tree lily has grown so much this year, and it's actually towering over the space here in this island. I think that looks really pretty. And here's a beautiful view of the quickfire tree that I have here in the front garden. And for those of you that are wondering, the quickfire, it's in its 7th year in the space. And in terms of size, it's only about, I would say, 4 feet wide canopy, that is. And in terms of height, it's only grown to about 5 feet, 7 or 8-ish. And it hasn't grown so much taller. It is a lot bigger than what it was when I first planted it, but it's still under 6 feet for me, even though it's in its 7th year. And just like the quickfire on the other side of the garden, this one also get a lot of winter damage. And I recently lost a whole entire branch on the canopy, and that's why the canopy is able to be sort of staying within the 4 feet. If I were to be able to save that one branch, I think that would extend another foot or so wider all around the canopy. So I think with our climate and the severity of our winter, and with all the dieback, many of the plants for me usually don't get to grow to its full potential unless it's in an area where it's protected from our severe winter and ice storm. I think in terms of the color, I don't think you can find another panicle hydrangea that has the same vibrant pink color at this time of the year. So I think this must be the most beautiful panicle hydrangea at this time of the year. There's nothing more pretty than the panicles on the quickfire. And in terms of its panicles, it's got a lacy sort of effect. And I love that area of coloration, and also the fact that it attracts a lot of insects like butterflies and bees, which I think makes it really special. And I think any plant for me that attracts insects to the garden is one that I like. And here's another beautiful view of the contrast between the white alyssum and the blue fescue grass, as well as autumn joycetum and the arborvitae here. I think that's just so pretty. And right behind the autumn joycetum, you're going to see that it is my little lime punch. And I think this one is most stunning right now. And you can kind of see that with all the rain that we've had lately, the little lime punch is actually holding up quite nicely. That's because the stems are actually woody and strong. Even though the panicles are full and compact, it's actually quite heavy. But the stems are just so strong that it's been able to hold up the panicles beautifully, which I think is extra special here. And I think, the contrast that you see here, this is that lime green color when it first opened up, and it turns into this whitish color here, which I think that's when it's most pretty here. Here's a beautiful contrast of the little lime punch panicles compared to the bulbul right next to it. It's so pretty. And here you can see the contrast again. This is that sort of lime green color of the panicles when it first opened up. And then it turns into that sort of creamy greenish color, and that's creamy white, and then it turns fully white like this one. And from this view, you can still see some of the blooms on my reblooming purple boomerang lilac. It was blooming beautifully last week, but I think some of the blooms have just recently faded. And I'm actually really amazed at how, the powwow echinacea or coneflowers are blooming. They've been in bloom for weeks now, so this is really, really amazing. And right behind that powwow echinacea coneflower, you see that's the panicle hydrangea that I grew from seed, and the blooms have just started to open up. You can kind of see that this, I think, is very unique. It's got that sort of lacy look to the panicles, so I think it looks like it might be a lace cap, because I can see that there are these florets here that have just opened up into that creamy yellow color, and then looks to me like these ones here might be the fertile blooms, which I can't wait to see it in full bloom soon. I think from this view you can see that the alyssum is starting to look beautiful now, and start to bloom a little bit better. In the previous video, I don't know if you remember, but it was hardly blooming. Most of the blooms were eaten by something, and I think it was probably snails that are going around feeding on them. And here from this angle, you can kind of see my banana cream daisies are starting to fade. So I'm going to actually have to go in and start cutting them back. But I think last week they were most gorgeous. And I love that buttery color when they first open up. But that color is now gone. So you can kind of see most of the daisies that are left have now turned fully white. And here from this view, you can see the blooms on this vanilla strawberry tree that I have on this side starting to come out, and even the bulbo blooms are starting to come out too. And compared to the bulbo plants in the garden, you can kind of see that the one that's planted in the container there, that tree, the bulbo tree, as well as the vanilla strawberry tree, the blooms are actually behind the plants that are in the garden. Here on this side of the front garden, I have all my pots and different plants in here. And right behind this planter where the bulbo is, I have my little lime hydrangea. And I don't know if you noticed, but the little lime, since it's been planted in this spot, the panicles are a bit more of a whitish color than it was before when I had it in the previous location where the little lime punch is currently located at. So far, I think I'm really loving the little limes in this new location where it gets a bit more shade or less sun than it was getting before. And that could be the reason why the color is not as creamy yellow green than it was where it was before. And before I stop the video, I just want to show you this beautiful view that I get to enjoy almost every single day in the evening during the summer gardening season, and that's this beautiful sunset. It's just really, really beautiful, and I'm very thankful for being able to sit here and enjoy the garden and enjoy the sunset with it. Just really magnificent. So I think I'm going to stop the video here now. I want to say thank you so much for watching. Take care, everyone. I will see you all next time. Bye bye for now.